to have Iain and Jason from New Jersey today. Thank you for connecting with us and being here with us today.
Thanks for having us, Christina.
Awesome.
Great to be here.
So I don't know if we have people joining yet, so we probably don't. But if you're hearing us on playback, then put in the chat slowly and steadily where you're connecting from and what piqued your curiosity to come through. But in the meanwhile, I will take the pleasure to introduce our guests. So Iain Kerr, if I pronounced it correctly, I tried to do the Kerr part, but I don't know if I did it properly, is a designer and innovation researcher working at the intersection of creativity and ecology and emergent systems to make disruptive change possible. His unique approach evolved from over 20 years plus experience of experimenting across different industries, from the arts to ecology. And he co-directs the MIXLab at Montclair State University with Jason. Who is Jason? Jason Frasca is an entrepreneur focused on leveraging emerging technologies for meaningful social transformation, and whose ventures have taken him into a wide variety of spaces, from health to law. I'm curious. His expertise in entrepreneurship and innovation led him to be hired as the first full-time faculty for the Feliciano Center of Entrepreneurship and Innovation at Montclair State University, where these two guys have met, where they co-founded and co-direct the MIXLab, the campus innovation and research center. I'd like to visit one day. So if anyone wants to visit, we can knock on their doors and say, hi, we arrived.
Anytime.
We'd love to have you.
That'll be lovely. So together you co-founded Emergent Futures Lab, which is a strategic innovation consulting firm, and you've pioneered award-winning innovation processes, frameworks, methods, tools, and practices to help organizations build resilient and adaptable ecosystems that foster spontaneous, organic, and groundbreaking innovation. Who's interested? Show us on the chat if you'd love to learn from these two amazing people we have with us today. I want to see some movement on the chat if we can. If you're here, say hi. I can see 6 people have joined. So in the meanwhile, while you're saying hi, I would like to also introduce myself so that you know who's hosting. I am Christina Greedy. I'm a purpose and career coach, and I have founded eudaimonia, which is a Greek word, and I am on a mission to democratize human flourishing. I coach ambitious professionals to decode their purpose and find career alignment. And I introduced the eudaimonia success model in 2018 globally as a TEDx speaker. I am writing my book on how to access the eudaimonic state of mind. You might be wondering, what does eudaimonia have to do with innovation, leadership, and creativity in a complex, adaptive world? Well, let's find out, shall we? Right, we've got Isabel, Diala, and Gul. I don't know if you know any of them, but if you do, hi everyone, thank you for joining us. And I cannot see who's joining from Facebook, unfortunately, so please do write your names. And I would like any of you to get us started with how you define or approach, is perhaps a better word, innovation, in how you teach it and, you know, how you convey it to your audiences.
Sure. I think for us, we have a unique definition of innovation and creativity where we start from a non-human perspective, from the idea that all reality is creative. It's not simply that humans are creative. It's not that creativity starts in the mind and then it goes into the world, but we see creativity all around us all the time. We see it at a material level, you know, plate tectonics are emerging, and we see it at the evolutionary biological level, new species, new types of species. And all of this has to do with the complex adaptive systems viewpoint, where you don't need an author for creativity. It's an emergent property of reality. And that humans can join it and participate in it, engage it. But so that's really where we locate creativity and because of that innovation.
Mm.
Yeah, I would just add to that, the humans are not authors of it, right? Reality is this dynamic, emerging worldly opportunity to engage with, and the reality allows for is always creative, right? Reality is always creative, something that we're participating in and joining in, not authoring through ideation, ideas, imposing ideas and outcomes on a reality. It ignores the dynamics of relations that are taking place all around us and feeding into that.
Wow. So I'm keeping, first of all, creativity and innovation, very blur lines between the two, I guess.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we are not authors of creativity or creative reality. We just have the luxury to see them and relate to them. Is that
Well, I think I would say the first part is we're always participating in them. Like we're of them. We're not separate. So and I think this is an important part for leadership and thinking about complex systems is there's no like outside. It's not this God model where somebody can stand outside of it and look at it as if it's elsewhere, but we're shaped by reality as we shape it. We're part of it, and we can notice, depending on how we're engaged with it, we can notice novelty and difference. And I think the easiest way to notice it is to probe in a way that produces or pushes systems in different ways. So our approach is really much more active. It's not, stand back, ideate, come up with a plan, carry out a plan. But you're always immersed in a reality. It's non-linear. You can statistically perhaps predict certain forms of order. But when you're really interested in innovation, creativity, and change making, you're looking to produce and work with conditions that have propensities where it might be more likely that certain things emerge, and then you can work with those as they emerge and develop them. And that's why I think we blur creativity and innovation, because they're always blurred. There's never any clear-cut line like, okay, here's let's say a human innovation that follows this pathway, and then there's just some generic creativity, or that innovation's about purpose. It's always much more complex and interwoven.
Mm-hmm. And that's why you were letting me know when we were preparing for this that it is an approach. It's a point of view. And that brings me beautifully on how you both, from the work that you're publishing out there, I've seen you challenge the boundaries of status quo concepts. Like we hope to go to university or anywhere else and learn that this is the definition of innovation. This is the definition. But you don't do that. You actually challenge all those boundaries for concepts such as art, creativity, innovation, entrepreneurship, leadership. So, what actually aligns both of you? What's your mission behind Emergent Futures Lab? Because it's a movement, and I think you're here to really, you know, tell us something different, and that unites you. I have a feeling, but I'm like,
Well, yeah, I think maybe we're part of a movement, not a movement.
yes, of course.
And I think what's united us in our approach and our work is we're interested in two questions. What is innovation? And then how do you innovate? And I think, if we can understand what innovation is, which is largely a lot of the content that, we put out, we're trying to understand what innovation is beyond the traditional, ideation models, the human-centric types of models. And so once we can understand them and truly, break apart the clods of, misconceptions and presumptions about creativity that are instilled in all of us at quite young age. And if we can break those apart, we can start to understand what we can do and how we can connect and engage with it, right? Like, it's an opportunity for action. It's an opportunity for us to experiment with the reality, So yes, we're of it, and we can, as Iain said before, probe it. We can push it, we can test it, and we can try different things. But it's not going to come from our mind, If we're focused on what's in here, right? It's that isolationist authored approach. But if we start to experiment with it, then we can do something, really special. And so I think that's what's kind of bonded us in our work over the last nearly 10 years.
I think also, like to just jump on what Jason's saying, there's a number of movements that I think are really important to rethinking creativity and innovation, that we really participate in and try to push. And, the first is the idea of an active cognition, like embodied cognition, that thinking isn't happening just in the head, but thinking is embodied and it's extended into the world. It happens with tools, and it happens because of certain environments and practices and habits and other people. It's shared. And once you see that, the classical idea of creativity, which is so much about having a unique idea and this aha moment, you see that that's absolutely a non-starter, because there's nothing happening just in the head. It's not just in the brain for any type of thinking. So that means that we have to be much more active and consciously active, like Jason's saying, engaged, participatory, experimental, what have you. And that leads, I think, to like the second big movement, which is like complexity theory, where we understand that things are not linear, and I think that alone, the idea that things aren't linear, then gets rid of so many other ideas about creativity and innovation and change making, where it's this idea of, ideate, plan, and make, a very linear one that you even see in design thinking or something. You can't work in a linear way. And for us, the core of that is to understand emergence, where these multiple factors are leading to something greater than the sum of the parts to emerge, that has an ability to change the parts themselves. And once you see that, all of these other parts of creativity and innovation start to fall into place. And then I think the other parts are coming from anthropology and sociology, where there's these movements to see how, these practices shape us at a profound level. Evolutionary theory with looking at exaptation and niche construction, how our environment makes us. So, if there's anything unique about what we're doing, is we're synthesizing these different really revolutionary approaches and bringing them to bear on, human practices of innovation, organizational practices, organizational leadership, and trying to be really conscious about it. But we're certainly not the only ones. There's many interesting people working on this, especially, in those areas I was talking about.
What's striking for me is how you're weaving all of these different disciplines. And now that you have explained this to me, I can see quantum physics, I can see ecology that I've done at university, and I understand it quite intimately. Biodiversity, evolution, sociology, anthropology, all of it. And I mean, who taught me I'm linear and I can do design? Who do I need to blame now, right?
Yeah.
We're not blaming anyone, but it's blowing my mind, the fact that all my education has been simplistic and linear because it had to be, but actually that doesn't equip me to be able to feel creative. And this is a different discussion. But so as an ex-consultant, obviously, I've been taught about innovation and how does that look like in business terms. And I can give you all the schools that, the design thinking schools and so on. But, so let me frame my next question. Consultants and other business professionals have been taught about how innovation should look like, and the typical way in which we're told how it should work like is research and development. It's a scientific, analytical process, and you go somewhere, you learn the expertise and the knowledge, and you come back and you apply it. And if you do that enough, many times, if you know how to experiment enough, I guess, is what we learn, then at the end of it, the sausage, which is creativity and innovation, comes out, and then, you become a multi-millionaire, if not a billionaire, like
Yeah.
Steve. So, I mean, that's the scenario, I guess. But what I particularly like about reading your newsletters was, in particular, you compared different thinking models, and what piqued my attention was how you said literally that we still think in the ancient Greek way, because this was the logical way, I guess, that was the groundbreaking thinking at the time, and we still carry it 2.5
Yeah.
millennia later. So how what was striking for me when I was reading this was how my classical education has been basically delaying me from being able to see what I need to see, especially in a complex adaptive world. So how would you deconstruct somebody who's classically educated? I mean, and I'm talking as, a Greek here, through my education. How can I just lift that and see things differently? How would you help me do that? If I was your student, I would challenge you enough to say, but how about this and how about that?
I guess there's a couple parts to that. Like the first, I think, important part is, just understanding, the history of the West. So it's one strain of Greek thought, which was explaining about, how something can come from nothing, and that there needs to be something that doesn't change, some set of ideal forms, or like the unmoved mover. And that became central to like Christianity explaining the role of God, which then shaped the Western tradition, where creativity was something only God had. God made everything, and what humans could do was be inspired, which meant to see God's plan in some way and then try and make it on Earth. So we were doing a very sophisticated form of copying of a fixed, unchanging truth. And, that shaped Western thought and practices in a way till the 1800s. And creativity as a word only appeared at the beginning of the 20th century, which is like crazy. And it's not like there was other words and they didn't have quite the right one, but they had the concept. It's literally this concept that something genuinely new could emerge only started to take form in the 20th century. And so I think that shapes, then the next part you're saying with education. Like most of our education is a type of knowledge learning, like where it's already fixed in this kind of God model. Learn the periodic table, learn covalent bonding, learn, statistics, whatever it might be, right? But 98% of learning is like there's a correct fixed answer. So you're not learning how to explore, to probe systems into new states. And I don't think I was never told that it's possible to have genuinely new forms of knowledge emerge. It's kind of like it's already all there. And I think innovation, creativity is, when it's disruptive and when it's not just an improvement, is genuinely producing something new that's qualitatively new, ontologically new. So it has like a new form of truth, a new form of practice. And that's radically challenging. And to imagine telling, and this is something we're really interested in, is like, how do you have this with a kindergarten, student, a grade 1 student? How can you help them experience a world where it's possible for something genuinely and radically new to emerge? So that's a big interest of ours, as well as the organizational consulting is like, how do we shift pedagogy in that way?
Experience side of things, right?
Yeah.
It's a feeling, and that's why you were talking. It's not just the cognitive; it's the embodiment of that ability to
Yeah.
experiment and probe.
That's the other part. Like, if you think about like how do we set up spaces? We set up spaces to disembody people. You know, like to push everything into some mental, like you're sitting at a desk in a chair. It's hard to get up. It's hard to move around. It's hard to set up an experimental space to test things. You know, so it reinforces in these feedback loops a way of feeling yourself as just a mind type being and pre-given knowledge and all of those things.
Wow. Okay, so are you rolling around on the floors then?
Sometimes.
Now I want to study with you.
Yeah. I tried as an experiment, just as a side note, to live for about 10 years without any furniture. You know, just stuff on the floor and nothing on the walls. And
how did that work out?
well, I think it, you know, the first part is incredibly hard because your physiology is, you know, shaped from birth to be with certain furniture. And so your skeleton, your muscles, your organs. So just changing that like overnight is incredibly difficult because, you know, back to this, like you're embodied and extended. And so suddenly you're lost. It's like you've cut off a chunk of your actual being and you have to kind of find it anew. So I think a big part was like just persevering to figure out how to make something different happen. But it, you know, I just bring it up in the sense of our environment isn't just something extra. And I think this is an important part for leadership and organizations is like, if you just have information about creativity or you just have workshops, but you don't change the actual environments and the infrastructure, the organizational logic, it's just going to bounce back. Like its propensity will take you back to whatever else it was. And no matter how many times or posters you put up saying like, do whatever, like the embodied, enacted, habitual environmental practices just move everything back in the other direction.
Yeah, habit. Wow, that's powerful because you said reality shapes us as well. So the environment create shapes us back, and you know it was striking to imagine me without, of course, the laptop, the desk, the chair. You know, how would I be doing this meeting? Anyway, I don't need to have an existential crisis right here. I think right now.
We'll save it for off camera.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can send you my first impressions. While husband is away, I can throw all the furniture and get him to come back to a house of no furniture. So I do receive your newsletter, as I said, the Emergent Futures Lab weekly. Something that really, really struck me was about how you said that innovation doesn't give any answers. That it's not about a method and that it's not even about us. And I think you already started shaping our mind around that. ... So I just want to let you finish the sentence here. So if it's not all these things, what else is it not? And perhaps how we can start grasping it, because we talked about environment, space, nonlinear. So start making it perhaps a bit more. I don't know. I'm not going to say the word because I don't want to define it.
Do you mean like in like how do you do it sense, the practical?
So how does it, if it's not about us as leaders, if it's not about answers, if it's not about how does it look like, how does it even have shape of some sort? How can we recognize when innovation, new thinking has emerged? and you started talking about emergence as well.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot of questions there. I guess the part like where we kind of really stress, like, it's not about problem solving or answers and these things. I think for us, what's important is that it's a way of pushing back against what are the really common practices you see in organizations, where often they'll bring in someone like an innovation consultant to help them, like brainstorm, ideate, develop, and push a team towards some new product, like some new solution, some new answer. But there's so many problems with that approach, from theoretical to practical, but ultimately it's just very brittle. You've got a one-off answer to something. And our real interest is, how do you develop as an organization an ecosystem? And in that, that's like organizational logic, the environment, the tools, the techniques, practices, culture, all of those parts, such that you're more creative than not creative. Like, the propensities are towards new things emerging. And so not to focus like on solving one thing, doing one thing, having one great idea, and then going back to normal, which you see so often where organizations might have like an innovation challenge. And like the 3 best ideas they'll get some funding internally and they can work on it. But they haven't, changed anything about the organization, changed anything to make it more spontaneously creative, dynamic, able to deal with reality that's, complex and changing and what have you. So that's really, our goal in a way is very pragmatic. It's like to be more pragmatic than, I'd say like very stupid things like just doing one-off creative exercises. And that's where you could say there's a type of leadership involved, where you're willing to step back, see that this is a longer, more involved process with multiple scalar changes, and that it's not going to lead to immediate results. Like in the next quarter, nothing's happening, nothing's changing. And and I think once you start moving into being more innovative, you also, there's more failures. You have to have a culture that's willing to experiment, to try things, see that they lead not to nowhere. To be able to iterate at long stretches to allow things to co-emerge. And, so that's really the kind of focus of when we're saying all of these things that might sound polemic or crazy, if you take them out of context, like it's not about whatever. It's really to get people to focus in on what I think really counts organizationally. But also I think like to your work as a consultant, like what's the meaning of a beautiful life, a good life? It's going to be one that's creative, one that can meet reality. And that's like stopping solving problems, like as a focus, but what does it mean to make a world, a different world?
Yeah, and I just add to that, Iain, right? Like setting up these ecosystems are leaderless leadership, right?
Yeah.
You're creating opportunity for the system to lead and pull you along, opportunity for feedback, recognizing it, incorporating it, acting on it, allowing the system to lead the people as opposed to the people leading the system. It's there's nothing fast about it, which is often, this kind of bottleneck we run into often. Quick solutions. Iain mentioned the one-off workshop as a way to transform the organization, it not incorporating the senior leaders of the organization, at the very top, The ecosystem as a whole, right? And all of its parts need to be included and incorporated for real change, to happen, and for that propensity for real change to happen.
And I love the seed you're planting in our minds, because the leaderless system that leads, a scary thing. Ask anybody to get on a train and say your company now doesn't have a train driver. I mean, that's what happened in London when the DLR was created.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that also kills the ego too, right? Like, people don't like to let go.
Of course
You've
not.
got to be egoless, and that's very antithetical to leadership.
Totally.
I think, they're like the one, so this would be the other part I'd add to like a definition of creativity. To get at this, that it leads is, systems are dynamic, but they have stable states. So they're, repeating and looping and, but, if you can probe that system such that new propensities develop and you can flow with them, follow them, develop them and stabilize them as their own thing. And this is, like they're partially sequestered and supported and you have some novelty emerging. Then that novelty, like what's happening and what Jason's saying, is the novel system is then feeding forward into the existing one and leading the change. And this is what it means to like have a system, led change. And, and I think, where it sounds scary in a way, we live our lives this way. Like it's not like there's like pure free will and you could literally do anything. You're in a system that has propensities, that's moving you along. And, for good or for bad, you're co-shaping those is your type of agency. It's not a godlike agency where you're like, you can press the stop button, move things around, and then like press go or rewind. And it's like you're in this emerging dynamic reality and you have certain degrees of freedom and you can leverage them in ways that have unpredictable outcomes. So it's not like it's a fixed logic, but it's, and I think this is like the other part of the Western tradition. Those concepts were never there, but you do see them in many other traditions, and I think this is another part, like our work draws a lot on philosophical traditions from, Japanese philosophy, Chinese philosophy, Indian philosophy, both contemporary and historical, and then researchers and what have you. So that's, there's a lot of interesting stuff there.
So we've got a question. I think, hi Thomas, this is from Neos Chronos. He's my business mentor, actually. So he asks, if you were to compare, contrast existing, maybe I can show it here, linear innovation approaches like Ulrich's jobs to be done, first principles, etc., to your method, where are commonalities and where are major differences? Ooh, that's a textbook difficult question, Thomas. But maybe very on general level, what would you say the major difference of your philosophy is from linear innovation approaches that say, okay, these are the things that need to be done?
Yeah, I think there's like, this is one thing, we haven't really talked about, but I think it's also important to see that, the types of change we're talking about, or, creativity is about change, is some type of difference. And you can categorize difference as like change in degree and change in kind. And radical creativity, which we've been really focusing on here so far in the discussion, is that kind of qualitative change in kind. It produces a different world, a different system. But there's also change in degree. and I think change in degree is this like improvement, like slight variation. You've got one chair, now you can make 1,000 different ones. And, so when we talk about linear forms of creativity, they're really valid. And they're part of this change in degree part of the equation. And you can never get away from that. Even if you have a change in kind, you still have to make it real through change in degree. It's really that we've put all our focus, and historically and in contemporary sense, on this change in degree side. And we've done it in a very linear way, and we've not focused on the change in kind. So part of what our interest is in is like, how do we move to understanding change in kind, and this kind of qualitative world-making logic of creativity, and then feed that back in to change in degree. And I think the big difference when you come to the change in degree side is that that a lot of these ideas that are linear don't understand, or I shouldn't say don't understand, ignore that you're co-emerging with something. And that things are environments and systems. They're not discrete objects and products. So that you need a type of strategy of co-emergence, where you're building an ecosystem. And I think you really see this most clearly when people talk about, like, what does the customer want? And imagining that there's a static subject out there somewhere with fixed wants and needs, rather than like objects. Just making an object changes people and changes you and changes environments, and then there's a feedback loop. So it's not like there's fixed anything. So you're trying to like co-emerge. And I think so that these kind of more linear models of jobs to be done, first principles, they lose sight of the kind of co-emergent part of things, is what I would say. But they're not like entirely wrong in the sense like that there is a world of change in degree.
But they miss the complexity element that you were mentioning, right?
Yeah. And I think that's the really like pragmatic part, is like, if you sit in a world of ideation and you have this, like say design thinking, empathize, ideate, plan, and make, you're really missing how things are happening. And it's not like you'll be entirely wrong. It will work, but it will always surprise you in ways that your model can't really adapt to well. And so you're losing the possibilities because you're just, no, it's doing this.
Yeah, and I think a few people are commenting here. John Flack, discover coordinative structures. Let me actually show it. As part of motor skills, constraining degrees of freedom to take advantage of natural constraints. I think you have talked a lot about constraints as well. I wouldn't be able to pretend I can say the name Alaberstein and Turk, maybe. Beautiful. So I think some people are resonating already with some of the bibliography, perhaps, that I have no idea about. But let's go into the practical part of what you do as well, because I bet, when you are actually helping people realize they can create worlds and ecosystems that can think and operate differently, rather than the linear models of innovation, where we're just changing, the degrees of improvement, and these are still valid for whatever reasons. But actually, sometimes with situations like COVID, where things change entirely, we are caught very quickly into the narrative that, oh, we didn't plan for this, we didn't know what to do, and then we just have to. I guess it's a good thing, because we can innovate much faster, but we are caught by surprise. So how is this all relevant then to business leaders? A lot of my audience are on the business side of things, and I can imagine you're promising them that they can create new worlds and new ecosystems in their organizations. Not you promising them, but you could, help them create that. But if they could take away something from our chat today, what are the practical and applicable principles, perhaps, that they can take away to be able to go back and start creating those ecosystems to consistently innovate? Without them, I mean, what a great opportunity if leaders can do that for their teams, without dissolving to entropy, without losing control entirely, if possible, although they should be able to let it go. How can a leader then create a safe space, as we were talking last time, for their team and for innovation to happen, for the sake of innovation as well?
So that, yeah. I think, like some simple, shifts that I think are important, that have, threads running through the whole conversation, is really to de-emphasize, as an organization, this ideation, plan, and make model, where, you've set up the organizational flow, the environmental architecture. So it's about, ideation and presenting and evaluating presentations, and then green lighting some to go forward, and move to much more models that are highly engaged, like where you have an area of interest, you have a way of probing it, getting feedback, developing, following, and to have, I think another part of that is, like, you have to make an organizational structure where teams can emerge, and roles can change. So imagine we were all assigned, the three of us, to a team and an organization to work on some new project. But as we start, probing and experimenting, we realize that perhaps I'm the wrong person. We need two other people part-time. We need somebody from outside the organization. Does the organization have the structure that it can even adapt to that? And then, like, the resources can flow and move. So I think there's a lot of infrastructural changes. There's environmental changes. There's, and these are all, like, really practical things. But part of it, I think, starts where people get a sense of what this means. And this is where we like to play games with groups of people and do workshops where the games and the workshops allow people to embody these experiences in a non-threatening manner, where we're not talking about, like, emergence and self-organization. We're not talking about, propensities of novel creativity, but they're actually doing it in real time in a day-long type workshop. And I think these kind of things really help people in leadership roles, the C-suite, other parts, sense and feel what it means. And then they start to think in their context, what would we need to do to be more like that and less like they are now? And then, we can start to work with them to strategically test out context relevant additions. But so I think often the key way to start is have experiences, in some way that allow you to embrace, like, being more embodied, extended, what have you, allow you to feel emergence. And those things are really critical, because I think if it's just intellectual and it's just like, here's an idea or theory or concept, you miss what it is, and you miss sensing how you can, as a leader, as C-suite, participate in those changes.
Yep. Lectures are not very impactful, right? Experiences are. So experience it first before even introducing any of the language, and allowing someone to be able to reference back to what they've experienced and felt and noticed that was different than what they've traditionally been coerced into following, and that's definitely the core of our approach in terms of relating some of these concepts.
Wow. So it seems to me that you give them a glimpse of freedom, of what it looks like to be innovative and creative. And then once you get a taste of that, really, then you have to have that as a guide to guide you on your way back of creating that ecosystem to allow others to experience that too. But you're right, without that moment, that light bulb moment for people to be able to notice when they are partaking into the creation, which is not theirs, which is not for them, which is not because they asked a question before
Yeah.
they start playing and probing and experimenting, then they have
Yeah.
really participate, and therefore they can understand what it means like to create that space for others too.
Yeah, we put a lot of effort into inventing games and workshop practices. But like I think to like John Flack's point here, like where he's talking about discovering coordinative structures and degrees of freedom and constraints. Like those things sound great and they're all true. But imagine telling an organization like, hey, this is what you should do. Like it makes very little sense abstractly. But when you like participate in the right types of games and exercises, then you're like, oh yeah, that's the language for this. And you develop your own language, new language. And then you start to see examples like John has here with the Fosbury flop, where you're like, okay, I see how that came about as like an embodied affordance-driven innovation. And so, like in a way, we could like sit here and list like the 600 things we would say like an organization should do, but it would kind of sound like, I'm sure like John's comment might sound like to somebody who's unfamiliar with any of that language, you're just like, it's all Greek, as we say in English, to me. And and so like how do you have to make it embodied and felt and experienced, and then you have to unpack this with people in a way that you're not telling them how to understand their experience, but you're allowing them to see that it was genuinely different than how they understood innovation, creativity before.
And if we didn't take this embodied approach, boy, would we be hypocrites, right? I mean, like, so we're living our own ethos. We're eating our own dog food. It's critical.
Yeah.
Cat food.
It's very close to the coaching approach. But I guess coaching can be intellectual to an extent, although we get those moments of when new worlds open up, something that they've never seen before, and they have realized it on their own, which is very close to the Socratic method of philosophy and asking questions and so on. And that brings me to how I see your work, based on what you explained. And I hadn't possibly imagined it would be so groundbreaking as I said it would be, but it is. So in my eyes, what I see that you are doing and you're enabling with emerging leaders is to read their environment, to create their own language, to be able to see the innate abilities within themselves, but also other people, and discern the opportunities for innovation and know how to actually bring that forth accordingly. So new language, being able to create their own new language, not the language you tell them, but the language they will need to take back home for people to understand, their people to understand. And the way I think I described it last time we spoke just to prep was, it's a radar. You're giving them, you're gifting them with a radar to be able to make sense of this in their own space and recreate that space, give that space a renovation, a facelift.
Yeah.
And once they do that, then they can communicate that back, and everyone can start seeing the signs and start utilizing them. And hence, it's not just the leader's job to be able to point the opportunities. It's, as you said, the system that starts leading itself, that starts, the ecosystem that starts innovating and moving towards the right direction for them. And I think you probably have a bad definition from me, but you've called those opportunities that are being tapped into and that are being seen as affordances. And I think that's a very beautiful word, because, then we see that we can actually afford them right now. Before, potentially, there would be just opportunities that we cannot grasp, but now we can afford them. We can actually make them happen. We can bring them forth. We can embody them. So what does it take then for a leader, for an organization, for a team to put this gift in motion? Because that's a huge gift, to be able to recreate our thinking again and again and again, in any given moment, in any complex situation. I mean, this is a gift. How would you?
Yeah, that's again like a big question. I think just to maybe break it down like piece by piece, one of the really, like I like when you say radar, and I think it's, we're trying to get people to have a different form of sense making, where, and this is this term coming out of embodied cognition, that life is sense making, under precarious conditions. And the way historically we've made sense is linear, ideation based. And so we live that. And I think, by shifting people's practices and environments and embodied things, they have a different form of sense making, where then they can see a far more relational, far more emergent approach is possible. And one part I'd say that's really important when it comes to things like coaching and leadership is, who we are is relational, like what everything is. And I think this is the key of this term, affordances. Like, it's what things are not in anything, but are in the relationship. And I think it includes our own identity, ourself. Our self comes from the relation of others, environments, aspects, what have you. And that affords certain possibilities. And those possibilities are stabilized socially, culturally, environmentally. And so we see the world a certain way as fixed. Change those, things open up again. And I think this is the really important thing to bring into an organization, to, and wherever it starts, with the C-suite, with a leader, but it's shifting a culture. But the important part, I think, to beat a dead horse, is that it's really about shifting that environment, that ecosystem, that'll allow a different relational set of affordances to emerge, and to take something different as reality. And that opens up then a creative way of being alive. And I think, just to come back to the Greek and the Socratic, is like Socrates was a cynic, part of and the cynics weren't like the modern word cynic, but they were people who believed in actively living their ideas. So it wasn't about dialogue, but it was about testing the world around them, living it. Like, Dionysius of Sinope, he was famous for, like, I don't know, masturbating in public, but like to test things, live things, probe things, do things. And Socrates, sadly had Plato rewrite him, but he was that. And I think the Socratic method is a method of testing, probing, doing, making new things. And that's what's so critical to bring into organizations.
And that absolutely aligns with what I am trying to at least put into motion with Udemy.
Yeah.
I think I've shown in my book synopsis. Um,
Yeah.
it's really about leaving the space, creating that environment for others to also emerge. And then it's not a heavy job. I mean, as a leader of my small organizations, I always felt the weight that I need to set the tone, that I need to do everything. And it's such a heavy job that I actually started hating at some point what I was doing because the weight was too much, and but actually by allowing others to take initiative to be there, and we just have a context where we allow that to happen, obviously not in the same way perhaps that you do it, but I'd be very curious to learn from you. It takes off the weight for the leader so that they can be creative and participate in the process without having to know the answer, to be the person who decides to. And it's
Yeah.
beautiful, and it's absolutely beautiful. And it means that I can walk out one day and what I've created will not die because somebody else will, and this is, it's not the impact I create. I'm not the author anymore. It can go forward without me. And I
Yeah.
think there isn't biggest peace of mind. There isn't biggest um, kind of harmony in the heart. Eudaimonia is about being at peace, being in Zen, when you know that you can actually walk out and leave something behind that people will take care of because it's
Yeah.
theirs equally as yours. And so, yeah, it's very much aligned to eudaimonia and what I believe the philosophy would be in today's world.
And allowing those within your organization to take that leaderless leadership approach, empowers them, right? They take great pride, and there's purpose bubbling up, right? And output increases, and all of the wonderful side benefits of that ownership and empowerment bubble up for a much more robust organization, but also a much more fulfilling life, right? For those that work for you, or with you. Yeah, I can. I
Paradigm.
mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a complete paradigm shift, and I think we already talked about, was it Monday, about how normal organizations value the productivity, whereas in creative organizations, it's not the output; it's about the value, and the meaning and the sense making of
Mhm.
people within that leads to fulfillment. That has huge value that nobody's, at least at the economic system right now, is not able to showcase. The value of those organizations and what they shift. And I mean, imagine if we can apply those approaches to the global climate issues that we have. But what the beautiful, thing about your approach is that it brings, the gifts of every scientific, perhaps, approach. The anthropology you spoke about, more ethnic studies, the biodiversity studies, ecology, law, health, all of these things blend beautifully into how we can lead, and we can lead from a place of no ego, as well. And I'm really moved. I'm really, really moved. We've got a comment here, which I will read out because I don't have a chance to read. But if you have got any questions, whoever is still here with us, a lot of people can relate to sports, says John. The analogy of Rob Gray's work on sports and how we learn to move, that was relating to embodiment and in our environment, is a good source for thinking about exploring constraints to improve performance. As with sports, an important selling point for innovation is to, and I cannot see what the next one is. What does it say? Innovation is to get a competitive edge. So,
Yeah, we use I think sports is a really good, for many reasons, because it's shaped by an environment, say like with soccer/football, the field, and the field is charged differently. If you're in front of your goal, means one thing relationally versus the other goal. And it's embodied, it's extended, it's relational. The star of a soccer game isn't any person. It's, the thing that counts is the ball and its movement, and it changes who you are, and you change to it in the field, and in relation to others, and all strategies of soccer are these relational ones about how you shape space. With, say, Barcelona, like, we'll keep short passes, ball on the ground, whatever it might be, but it's these things of, like, dynamic constraints that allow certain things to be more likely than others, embodied relational. So I think it's really useful. We try to invent games that could feel a bit like a sport, but really are closer to the things that are happening in an organization. But they have that same quality where it's about relational dynamics and emergence. And and I think this is, again, one of those things, once you start to understand, or you have this much more relational, emergent, dynamic set of sense making, you see how sports isn't about one person, like the proper name of a star, but really about the conditions of the system. And so, the system is making these people in a way. So all of that, I think, is really important and useful.
Yeah, thank you. And we've got a question here from Reggie. So as someone who's seeking employment, how do you recommend a person demonstrate or highlights creativity and an innovative mind for potential employers? If they understand that now that I've got this new definition, I think it will be very hard to tell a potential employer, especially a HR person, that I'm innovative. Thank you, Reggie, for your question. I don't know if, as a career coach, I should step in a little.
What would you say?
Yeah, how would you, Christina?
Wow. So I'm caught off guard here. I think it really depends on who you've got in front of you, who's interviewing you. And I think it would, for me, if I am innovative and I want to demonstrate I'm innovative, first of all, as a career coach, I should say, use examples of where I've used my innovation in my previous experience. But regardless, I think I would probably step into my Socratic self for a moment and start asking the person how they define innovation, exactly what we did here.
Yeah.
And start understanding how they're sense making the world to bring out the best examples for them to relate to. And building on what we shared here, it has to be with how that person understands and relates to what innovation is, so that we can enable them to understand from our perspective what they want to hear. But yeah, that's my career coaching approach. I don't know if our guests have any more additions to that.
I would only add and build upon that and point to the actions you've taken, right? And highlight the experiences, and as opposed to ideas, right? Like, so point to a portfolio, a website, some collection of moments in time where you've created, where you've made, where you've innovated, where you've, generated difference, positive output, contributed to return on investment or profit, whatever it might be in any of those contexts across any field. But point to examples and experiences and describe them as such, as opposed to ideas.
And that shows the practicality of what you can forge and bring forward as a leader, as a person, regardless of whether you have a title or you have a position or some sort of scope within the organization to create change, because our role shouldn't stop us from being creative.
Yeah. Show, don't tell.
Yeah. Any other questions from the audience while we're wrapping up? Do you have any questions from what came up, maybe for the audiences or for me? You don't have to.
I've enjoyed at the end here how we got into eudaimonia and purpose. For me, that was very fulfilling. I enjoyed hearing you speak about it.
Thank you. And so to our audience, if you have enjoyed this, whoever is still here with us, give us a thumbs up in the chat to let us know if you did enjoy that, and how Iain and Jason have unfolded what creativity, innovation, embodiment, relation, affordances, propensities, ecosystems are. I think I need to write a summary about it. Also, for more content like this, do follow them. I'll put in all the events that I've got around, scattered around the web, their website, but also their LinkedIn profile. So go connect with them. But do follow the newsletter, which comes out weekly, which is the Emergent Futures Lab newsletter. So I will send you some information on that. So do sign up. It's very enlightening. And unless we've got anything else in the chat, I would like to thank you for your time with us today. I feel absolutely enlightened to have learned so much, and I'm absolutely curious and ready to attend any workshops that you have coming up anytime soon in Europe. Please do let us know. I'll be delighted to be able to share them with our audience. And thank you for opening my mind to a new world of what innovation is. And I wish I have learned it that way at business school, but also in several workshops from innovation consultancies that I have come across in the last few years. Thank you so much for being here.
It's been a real pleasure. It's really wonderful talking and also learning about what you're doing, and it's very inspiring. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Christina, for the opportunity and platform, to talk and just discuss and chat more here. This was really wonderful.
Yeah.
Take good care and have a good rest of the day. It's quite early in the USA.
It still is. The sun's out.
I know. It's so dark here. Take good care.
Take care.
So much.
Ciao.
Bye-bye,
Ciao.
everyone.